Right. And so this gets us to kind of so we move kind of values in general to values, a more specific discussion of values in this book, in this next section, right? God and morality. Yeah. He says this third argument he wants to offer is really an extension of the one that we've just had. So if you agree that, the most important value judgments we make in life are moral judgments, then now we have the same kind of questions with these kind of judgments, right? We believe that some actions are good and right while others are bad and wrong, and in some cases even wicked or evil actions. And some of these moral judgments are based on subjective taste or personal interest, but many times they aren't. They're objective moral judgments, right?
So when we agree that it's wrong that, of course, what the Nazis did to the Jews or what the Islamic State has done to innocent civilians in Iraq or Syria or vice versa, we don't mean merely that it's wrong for us and by implications not wrong for them.
Right.
It's just, it is.
It's wrong, period.
It's either a statement of fact like a hospital was bombed by terrorists, but then to say it is wrong that terrorists bombed a hospital is a completely separate question that you're bringing in. So is it wrong? Is it right? Or is it neither? And it's just a fact. So no, we mean that it's morally wrong, period. Right. It's not just a matter of different personal preferences or cultural traditions or whose side of the street you're on or whose finger's on the button. It's just wrong. What these murderous people have done is objectively immoral.
Right. That's the bottom line.
Right.
And so the moment we say objectively wrong, right, the Nazis, what they did was objectively wrong.
Yeah, they ought not to do it. So look out for your oughts and shoulds.
That's right. So the moment we say that, we're assuming that there are moral standards and that they're objective and absolute. Right. We're presupposing there are moral laws which transcend human individuals and our societies as well. And so who or what counts or accounts, we might say, for these moral standards or laws? Where do they come from? Right? What's the source of them? That sort of thing. And so once again, he tells us that this is a glaring problem for the atheists' worldviews like naturalism. According to such worldviews like naturalism, the universe has no ultimate meaning or purpose, right? And so in the end, there is no right or wrong way for the universe to be, right? It's simply what it is, right? And so the only ultimate laws are the laws of physics for the naturalists, but the laws of physics, notice, have nothing to say about morality, right? The laws of physics tell us about how things, we might say, do behave, right? But they don't tell us about how things ought to behave. Right. And so if that's all the laws that we have, or those are the only things that exist in the physical world is the only thing that exists, then we have no ought in that type of naturalistic world. Right.
They're just bodies in motion. That's all
right.
They're there.
That's right.
So in contrast, though, the Christian worldview makes sense of our moral judgments. There are transcendent moral laws because there is a transcendent moral lawgiver that we derive from that source, and even more so because we're made in the image of that lawmaker. We can reflect and maintain those transcendent moral laws. Moral laws cannot come from an impersonal source. They must come from a personal source. And this is part of William Lane Craig's further unpacking of the Kalam argument, whether God is impersonal or personal. And
you recall also that Mitch Stokes talked about the same thing. You have, in order for morality to exist, you have to have a person, right? Because moral values are personal values, right?
So it must come from a personal source and one with moral authority, so a moral being.
Yeah.
If the universe is God's creation, then God has authority over us. He made us for the purpose, and therefore he has the right to say how we should live. Right. Again, think back to the computer program. The programmer can decide what bits or bytes or parts of the program can interact or carry out whatever job is needed. And so if some level of sentience is done to that computer program, and they go outside the program, or the person who created the code gives it to the code maker to expand upon a secondary line of code, then that person can mess up the code. Syntax error, well, unfortunately, you fell outside the lines of what the code maker had. Let's take it back to the source. Hey, why is this?
Right.
Oh, well, you didn't add a tilde at the beginning. No, it's just HTML coding is one of those things. It's I'm forgetting a slash or a space or an underscore. It's something so good.
Exactly. So the universe is God's creation, and so He's the one that has authority over, right? He has the right to say how it should be done, how we should live, right? God's laws have real, then moral force, but they aren't arbitrary or capricious, because only God commands what is consistent with His perfect love and His goodness and His good purposes for the creation, right? In short, God gives us moral laws for our own good, and they come out of His good character, right? And so they're His, we might say, instructions for us, right? So objective moral judgments then presuppose that there's a God who has given us those moral judgments.
Right. And this falls right in line with the God of Judaism and Christianity. It's a God that enters into creation and interacts with His creation, reveals Himself, tells us in which way to stay on the path, and to warn us of what happens when we fall off. And it's a constant, reforming the remnant and continuing on until Christ comes to very much solidify those kind of two worlds of the physical and the spiritual, and really bringing them together.
Right.
Obviously, that's happened a lot more, but in the nature and the person of Christ, it's fully formed out.
So in order to have a even morality to exist, God has to exist, right? We have to have a person who is absolute, and authoritative in order to determine what is ultimately morally right or wrong. We can say, well, each one individually can determine something, but that's not objective, right? It's not independent of us, nor is it based on our culture, because, Nazis. Right? And
all those Nazis always ruining the fun for everyone.
And so, in order to have an objective standard of right and wrong, God has to exist, and so that's the point that he's trying to make here, right? So, in terms of general values, we've seen that God has to exist, and in terms of moral values, he's showed us that God has to exist.